of Tallahassee, very rural for a very long period of time. Everyone had second jobs, right? It didn't matter if you're the mayor, you're probably a farmer. In this case, a lot of our sheriffs were bakers, they were farmers, they did something other than just do this for a job, because you really couldn't afford to do this on its own. We can jump all the way forward until we get up to 1875. The only major sheriff in that time period in between was Leon County had the distinction of being the only sheriff's office in the state of Florida to have the same sheriff during the entirety of the Civil War. That was very unheard of. Even when the North came in and they occupied the generals that came in, they actually kept him as the sheriff. I think he tried to quit right towards the end of the war. He was gone for a little bit. They couldn't find anybody. They brought him right back in. Right? The whole, that was the Italian saying. They draw him back in. So we go to Philip DeCourcy. Philip DeCourcy is the first African-American sheriff in Leon County. He was appointed in February of 1875. He was born as a slave in Jefferson County, but like everything else, he was a teacher, a preacher, a blacksmith. He was the elected city tax assessor at the time that he was appointed sheriff. Unfortunately, he would only be the sheriff for 9 months, because as soon as he got it, he contracted pneumonia, and he was only there for 9 months and at 28 years of age. I mean, if you think about who we've had sheriffs, and obviously there's some people in this room that have been in Tallahassee for a long period of time. Think about the people that have been sheriff in your lifetime and how old they were. And obviously with experience and how long they've been in law enforcement or how long they've just been around Tallahassee itself. And you have a 28-year-old guy that's been appointed sheriff. He was well respected in the community, but this is a trend in this part of the world as people continue to do this. He was actually succeeded by the second black sheriff in Leon County history that was there for, I think, another 3 years. He finished out the term, and another well-respected person. Move forward to 1885. John Pierce was appointed to office in 1885, later re-elected. He would continue to serve as sheriff until he died in office in 1901. I've got down here as a mythical kind of figure in our history, and I say that only because if you look at newspapers around the time, you got to see a lot of him going out to California to pick up prisoners, going out to pick up murder suspects, and he was always traveling. There's a story about John Pierce where they found out that there was a person that was wanted in the state of Alabama, South Alabama. Of course, there's no pictures at this time, right? There's no one sending you a picture like we can get now. I can get a picture on my phone. Here's a wanted person, what they look like. They were given a description. They find out at this time that the guy's hiding down in Wakulla County. He's out in the marsh there someplace. So John takes 2 of his deputies and they decide, all right, we're going to go down here and we're going to find this guy. They find him out in the woods, and it takes them 3 days. They befriend this guy. They go through, they hunt with him, they fish with him, they eat with him, they drink with him, all because he's got a gun on the entire time and they don't want to have to get into it. After about 3 days of this going on, this guy finally got comfortable enough with these strangers. He took his gun off and put it aside, and they snatched him right there. So when I say it's a mythical kind of figure, that's what I'm talking about. These are the kind of things that, that story was told in the Tallahassee paper at the time, the Alabama paper at the time, and as a history part of what we get into, newspapers used to be able to interview the suspects. They used to be able to do, right there. There's actually a newspaper article where Frank Stoudemire, who was the sheriff back in the 30s, the 20s through the 50s. Where a bank robbery took place, and when that bank robbery took place, they actually interviewed the suspect in the bed after he'd been shot while the deputy's standing there. So, little different environment than what it used to be. He would personally extradite murderers back to Leon County, like I said, as far west as California. Jump up to Willie Langston. This is going to be the youngest sheriff in Leon County history. Prior to being the Leon County sheriff, he was actually the Tallahassee police chief. He was appointed sheriff to replace Sheriff Hopkins in 1907. At the time that he was elected, he brought in sheriff, he was 22 years old. 2 years after being being appointed as sheriff, he was chasing a Georgia suspect down at a turpentine camp down off of Spring Hill Road. And I don't know exactly where off of Spring Hill Road that would have been. I'm assuming somewhere probably around the airport area. While he is there, he ends up finding Mick Morris, who was wanted up in Georgia. The 2 of them start tussling over a shotgun. As they do, the trigger gets pulled. Sheriff Langston gets shot in the stomach and dies later in the hospital. As part of Tallahassee's history, Mick Morris, who was eventually caught up in Georgia, he's actually kept in Lake City in jail because they're afraid there's going to be a lynching, because they're afraid you've got a black man that's just killed a white prominent citizen. They are taken him to Lake City. He's brought back for trial. On a 2-day trial, he is convicted. He's convicted to die. They're going to hang him. The citizens don't believe that this is going to happen fast enough for them. So they go down to the jail, which at the time was on Gain Street, and they decide they're going to trick. They're going to trick the jailer, and I say trick the jailer into saying they're bringing in a prisoner. When he gets to the door, they bum rush him. They go in. They end up beating him, shooting him, and then hanging him from a tree outside the jail. So that is one of only 2 known lynchings in Tallahassee, but this is going to be one of the ones that was from there. One of the long history of being able to have Tallahassee police chiefs eventually become sheriff, and with Willie here. Jump forward to another lovely part of our history. We have James Robert Jones, Jim Bob, what they called him. I have to thank Matt for some of the history on this. He was actually able to help me out with the help of a lot of different people. Stan Willis over here, if you don't know, he's helped me out a lot with a lot of this history too. He worked at the sheriff's office. Jim Bob Jones was elected office in 1920, took office in 1921. In 1921, the state had already stopped the state version of what we call convict leasing. So in that case, what would happen is someone's convicted. Once they're convicted, they're able to be given out to different hard labor places. And a lot of times with us, the counties could continue to do this at this point in time. So in this time period in 1921, a kid gets on a train. He's from South Dakota. His name is Martin Tabbert. He ends up not paying for his train ticket. He's pulled in. He gets arrested. They take him to the judge. The judge sentences him for what ends up being a 75-cent ticket on a train, $15 in today's money, and they sentence him to hard labor in Dixie County at the Putnam Lumber Company, where they're down there making the railroad trestles, the railroad, the wood that makes the railroad come through. Say again? There you go, the railroad ties. Glad you guys are here. I thought you guys were all here to see me, and then I realized it's the food. So I appreciate everybody at least paying attention while you're here. It's turkey, so if you guys nod off, it's okay. You won't hurt my feelings. So in this case, Tabbert actually gets sentenced down there. His parents send a letter to the sheriff at the time and says, here's the money to pay for his ticket, to pay for his bail, and to pay for his ticket home. Please send him home. The sheriff, who is getting money, a kickback from the Putnam Lumber Company along with the judge, sends the letter back saying, sorry, he's no longer here. Return to sender. So they send the check and everything back. Over that time period, Martin ends up not working hard enough for the people down there, and they literally beat him to death. This goes on at least for 2 years. The family believes that he just had some kind of a sickness, and he died while he was incarcerated. And the unfortunate part of it is that's just how life ended up being for him. His cellmate, or the guy that was the bunkmate with him, ends up coming in, finding the family in South Dakota and saying, hey, I know this is what they told you, but this is actually what happened. They come down, the governor, then if you look at the newspaper, it's about a 2 or 3 week process. The governor ends up removing the sheriff from office, ends up also removing the judge from office. And at that time, and if you look at that time period for us, the early 1900s, we really didn't have anybody spend more than about 4 to 6 years as sheriff. So you figure if you're running an agency, you're running a company, and you're changing your agency head, you're changing your company head every 4 to 6 years, you're not getting a whole lot of consistency. You look at with the sheriff's office, and I've been very blessed over my time. I had Sheriff Campbell, who had been here for a long period of time. Now I've got Sheriff McNeil, who's been here for a very long period of time. You get that consistency. You get the same messaging you're getting over and over. Instead of every 4 years, you're getting something to change. So in 1923, when all this happens, and he gets released, and this is actually the reason why convict leasing was outlawed overall in the state. When this takes place, Frank Stoudemire goes down. At the time, he is the Fort Braden County Commissioner. He goes down to the Capitol, and he tells Governor Harding, I need to be the sheriff of Leon County. The badge that you see here on the left-hand side is actually one of Sheriff Jones's lapel badges. As a side note, he and the judge were put on trial in Pensacola. The main witness against him was his jailer, who had gone through all the records and knew everything that was going on. He and his wife get on a horse and buggy from Quincy, this is 1923, to go over to Pensacola to be part of the trial. And according to the newspaper at the time, his wife said that he looked over at her, said, I feel like I've been poisoned, and fell dead on the spot. as they're on their way over. So because of that, the sheriff and the judge are never convicted of any crime. The only person that ever serves time on any of this at all was the foreman that actually beat Mr. Tabbert to death. Sheriff Jones would eventually go back and work for the city of Tallahassee. He did that, I think it was Parks and Rec, wasn't he, Matt? Parks and Recreation, a Parks Department for him for a little while?
He did work for the city for a while, and then his son.
And then he eventually did become a Tallahassee police officer and retired as a sergeant in the 1940s, the late 1940s. His family was nice enough. That badge is actually on display up on the third floor outside the sheriff's suite. Would have been the actual, one of the lapel badges he would have actually worn while he was the sheriff of Leon County. Now we come to Frank Stoudemire. This is probably a name everybody's heard, at least at some point if you've gone through Tallahassee history, the Stoudemire family. He was appointed by office by Governor Hardy. When I tell you that he went down to the governor's office and said, I need to be the sheriff of Leon County. He had previously served under Sheriff Hawkins back in the early 1900s. He is the longest serving sheriff in Leon County history. Appointed in 1923, he would continue to get reelected until 1953. So he was the sheriff for 30 years. He was so well respected within the community that later that year, the Tallahassee Police Department, who wanted some stability in their department, came in and asked him to become the police chief. After about 2 or 3 months of trying to figure out if he could and wouldn't lose his retirement, they finally either created something or told him, yeah, you're fine, just go ahead and do it. And he would go on, I think until 1968, he would be the Tallahassee Police Chief. There's great pictures of him. I think TPD is part of their museum that they're getting ready to put together. He always, and there's not a picture of him here with it, but he always wore a white cowboy hat. I know that Sheriff Stoudemire's grandson, James, has donated that to them to be able to put in because he was never seen without it. One of the cool stories, there are a couple cool stories about Sheriff Stoudemire. One of them is in the 1930s, you had all these roving bands of people that were robbing banks, right? You had like the brothers that would come through, and there's these roving gangs of, like Jesse James and this kind of deal. Now, no one that famous came through. But in this case, in the 1930s, you had a group that was coming through from Texas. As they're coming through, they decide to stop in Tallahassee. They got 2 banks here they want to look at and rob. They stayed on Marine Street down on the south side. They're looking at all this. They send a guy ahead, hey, keep driving. We want you to look at other little banks that we can hit all the way to Jacksonville, all the way down the coast to get down to Miami and get it figured out. We're gonna set a plan here, find us 2 or 3 more so we can get some money. We always have a saying, at least I have at the sheriff's office, we don't catch the smart ones because we're too busy chasing the dumb ones. And in this case, one of the dumb ones, as he gets down to Miami, he decides he's going to get in a card game. They had not robbed the bank up here yet, but he had sent several letters back and forth because you couldn't call people on the phone like that back then about what banks they were going to hit. When you guys going to hit the one in Tallahassee? They go back and forth. Well, he gets into a card game while he's down there. He pulls a gun on somebody because he thinks he's being cheated. The police down there get called. They end up getting him at his house, and they pull these letters. And they send these up to Sheriff Stoudemire, and they let him know, hey, one of your 2 banks downtown is going to get robbed. Here's the address we know the guys are staying at. Well, you can't just go and arrest them based on a letter. Okay, people write stuff all the time, you never know. So the sheriff sets up with the Tallahassee Police Department. They got a couple of deputies, a couple of police officers, and they're going to set up at a couple different banks, and they're going to figure out. Capital City Bank is one of them right there at Tennessee and Monroe. There was another one just south of there. They were keeping an eye on both of them. They were looking for their vehicle when it pulls up. About 3 or 4 days later, the car pulls up. Sheriff sees it out there. Police officers see it out there, and the chase is on. They're in Model Ts, and they are hauling tail down South Monroe Street, which at the time stopped where? At the railroad tracks, right? You can go under them now, but at the time you had to go, you had to cut over to Adams and get south. As the newspaper tells the story, they're going down. Sheriff is driving as fast as he can. They pull up alongside this car, and he decides the police officer sitting next to him leans out with a shotgun, and they start exchanging gunfire. Ends up shooting the bad guy that's driving. It was birdshot, which hurts a lot. I'm sure he could attest. The car gets pulled over. They shoot out the tires, and everything happens from there. And there's a great quote in the Democrat where he's talking about with the bad guys. We just made bad plans. With a deputy sitting next to him. So that's our organized crime brush in the 1930s. Also, one of the great stories about Sheriff Stoudemire was he also made money as a farmer, and he delivered eggs and milk around the city and around the county. And when I say he, I mean the deputies and the police officers that worked for him on Sundays would come up. They would get their cars loaded down with eggs and milk and an address that they had to take them to. And so over the time, the 30 years that he was the sheriff, and then the extra 15, I've talked with a few people that have actually made those deliveries back in the day. But he would go through, and that was how he made a lot of his deliveries. Skipped in between, Bill Joyce, gentleman over here, Gerald Bell, correct? Mr. Bell worked for Sheriff Joyce. Sheriff Joyce was an FHP trooper that was elected sheriff. He served 2 terms and was eventually replaced by Sheriff Hamlin in 1969. Had worked as was a part chief of detectives with us, also worked for the Tallahassee Police Department in a certain capacity. He is actually the sheriff that laid the groundwork for the 911 system here in Tallahassee. First 911 calls were made in 1976, and he was the one that got all the funding, got everything set aside. So before that, you had to call someone directly. Having done some research in other parts of the rural parts of Tallahassee, I don't know if anybody knows this or not, but the city of Sopchoppy used to have its own police department. The last chief there, he'd actually been the chief through the 60s and off and on all the way through until 92 when the department was done away with, was the only person in that town that actually had a dedicated line. And they did call his house directly on the party line to try and get him on the phone, or they'd just go down and knock on his door and try to get him whenever they needed police services. With Sheriff Stoudemire, and I apologize, I meant to tell this story when I was in there with him. When he first became sheriff, until 1957, sheriff's offices only got paid by every arrest they made, by every piece of paper they served, and all the things that went along with that. So literally, at the end of the month, you would submit all of your data to the state. The state would reimburse you for all of that. That's how the deputies got paid. That's how the sheriff got paid. And then Florida Sheriff's Association in 1957 got a law passed that we need to put the sheriff's offices on a budget. We can't just say, hey, they're going to do this. If they can serve paperwork, it's going to be dependent on that. Thankfully, that got served. In 1957, when that occurred, on top of that, they also made it where every sheriff's office, you have to have green somewhere in your vehicle. And every sheriff's office went to a 5-point star. The only sheriff's office in the state of Florida that does not currently wear a 5-point star because they've gotten permission to not is the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office. They consolidated over. Even the Miami-Dade, who just went back to an elected sheriff, actually has a 5-point star now, but their previous was a shield with a star in the middle of it. But in 1923, when he was first elected sheriff and he had to serve paperwork, and he only had about 3 or 4 deputies working for him, pardon me. I didn't eat. I told people I didn't want to eat because I was going to burp, but that's what happens. Pardon me. In 1923, he has to serve paperwork as the sheriff, and he lived way out Highway 20 on Stoudemire Road. The house is still out there, the one that he actually lived in. He would get on horseback, and he would travel out Highway 20, up to Lake Jackson, up to Bradfordville, out to Chairs, all the way around Miccosukee, Chairs, and he would make the loop all the way around the county to serve paperwork. And most times it would take him 3 or 4 days to do that, and a lot of times he was staying with citizens that he knew out in that community to make sure that he had to go. But it was on horseback. I'm sure he was very happy when they finally got in the car. Sheriff Hamlin, the first major change, so we started, and we'll get into the uniforms here in just a minute. He actually changed our uniforms. The uniforms that are sitting up here are our original uniforms that were worn by deputies at some point in time. We'll get into a little bit of that up here in just a minute. Changed uniforms, they put the American flag with the state flag. This would have been in the late 60s when you had a lot of civil unrest that was going on. Newspaper told us a very specific reason why on that. Ken Kitsaris, I hear some groans. Ken Kitsaris. So Sheriff Kitsaris was the sheriff, obviously in 1977 to 1981. Big change for the sheriff's office at that point in time. So you have somebody that's not typically from the Tallahassee community that came in, that had run for sheriff a few times, was able to become sheriff. Obviously, he oversaw the Bundy investigation, but he also did some other things for the sheriff's office to help modernize it. He was the first sheriff to implement computers into our office. He was able to bring take-home vehicles to all deputies, so now it's just kind of a thing. Deputies come in, or police officers, they typically have a car they can take home. Prior to this, you literally would get out of a car, you'd hand the keys to the next person, the car typically wouldn't even be turned off, they'd get in it, and those cars would run 24/7. Which obviously puts a lot of strain on those cars. You're gonna have to pay more money for that type of deal. He also began construction on the new office on Thomasville Road, which is now not an insurance anymore. I don't even know what it is now.
I know, I've been up there so long, it's next door to Waterburger.
Yeah, it's over by the Whataburger on Thomasville Road. He started the construction of that office. Before that, the office was at the courthouse. We've had the jail in several different locations throughout the city, but he started that. He actually never sat in the office that he began to construct. It was not open until Eddie Boone became the sheriff in 1981. And I'm sure everybody here, if you've been around Tallahassee, you've got Sheriff Eddie Boone. He's a former deputy under Sheriff Joyce. He worked, and I've got a little bit of where he worked here, but if he has a fingerprint tech, Florida Sheriff's Bureau, which later became the Florida Department of Law Enforcement. He created the first ever school resource unit in the state of Florida. So all the deputies and officers that are in schools on a permanent basis, he's the first person in the state of Florida to create that. And he also oversaw the first SWAT team in agency history.
Also deputy in Bay County.
And he was a deputy in Bay County for a short period of time as well. Sheriff Larry Campbell, for those of you that never got the opportunity to meet Sheriff Campbell and have a candid conversation with him, I'm sorry. He was the most candid person I think I've ever dealt with. He would tell you what was on his mind. He didn't care. He was also very gregarious, liked to play pranks on people all the time. He was a former deputy under Sheriff Joyce in Hamlin, also worked the Florida Sheriff's Bureau. He was brought in to be Sheriff Boone as major with the undersheriff for there. He served in law enforcement for 53 years until his death in 2014. We had an in-between sheriff, a couple in-between sheriffs. When he passed away, we had Sheriff Rob Swearingen, who was there for 30 days. Sheriff Mike Wood, who was there until the end of that term. And then we had the first elected African-American sheriff of Leon County. Previously was the Tallahassee Police Chief, the Quincy Police Chief. Obviously, it was also the Florida Juvenile Justice Secretary, Florida Corrections Secretary, and has served over 45 years in law enforcement. I say first elected. The first two back in the late 1800s were appointed. He's the first elected African American sheriff in history. All right, so now we get into what we wore. So this is 1953. That is the first time we ever wore a uniform, 1953. So before that, deputies would literally be in street clothes. A lot of times there was jackets. You'd wear a nice suit coat, or you might just be wearing jeans and a shirt, just depending on what era and what they wanted you to do. In 1953, when Sheriff Joyce took over, they decided they needed it for special occasions, so funerals, things like that. Also in court appearances. You'll notice here, 1953, so we're just after World War II, so we have some nice Ike jackets that are involved with this. The gentleman on the left is Jack. My mind just went blank.
The left?
Yeah, Jack, Dawkins. Jack Dawkins.
Oh, okay, senior.
A very young Jack Dawkins. So this is going to be the patch and the badge that we wore at the time. The one that's up here on display, so I do have some stuff on display up here in the front, is a reproduction that we made. I actually have two original patches on display at the office in the museum that's up there. Obviously, you see here with the badge, it's not what you're used to seeing a deputy sheriff wear. In 1957, we did a big uniform change. You're looking at the uniform on the far left over there. Those are called stock star patches, or white star patches that you see on his shoulder. The gentleman on the right-hand side is actually Deputy Gene Goodman. He eventually would become the undersheriff of the agency as a Tallahassee police officer on the far left-hand side. In 1957, we kept the same uniforms as original. You're looking at the gray uniforms that are up here. The patches were staying, we call stock star patches. We talked about the Florida Sheriff's Association changing everything to a 5-point star. We wore a very small 2-inch badge at that point in time until 1977. But we complied with everything that they needed from us. 5-point star, we did that. We had the white cars with some green that were in there as well. In 1969, under Sheriff Hamlin, the shirt that's here, the second from the left, I told you about the shoulder patches, and they moved those in. The two flags, it was to show solidarity between state and national governments during a time of civil unrest. That was worn on the right sleeve with the normal stock star that was worn on the left one. In 1977, after Sheriff Katsaris came in, we moved to what the deputies affectionately called a puke green uniform. That would be this third one from the left over here, lime green, kind of a light green looking thing. Ronnie Boyce here on the left, and Phil Rivers on the right over here. We went out of the gray uniform, we went to more of a green, dark green pants with like a green stripe down, like a lighter green stripe down the side for a little bit. The two flags. Having talked with Sheriff Katsaris several times about it, he had brought the patch forward, the design forward. The only thing that he kept hearing from everybody was that the state and national flag needed to continue to be on the patch. If you come up here and look at it, it is on the patch. It's at the very top of the old Capitol. It's about that big on a patch that's that big. So technically, it's there. In the newer patches, with technology, you can see them a lot better than what you used to. But at this time, also, we went from the 2-inch badges to the larger badges that you see the sheriff's office wear today. So here's the design. You can see the flags there on top of the old Capitol. I think this has got a, I thought it had a laser pointer, does it? Hey, look at it, right there. So you can see that right up there. This is a larger badge that we would have worn back at that point in time. The patch also, if you come up and look at this afterwards, you're going to see that the patch size is actually a little bigger. That was changed over the course of just changing different things in the patch. We did some small redesigns over the years. If you look, we took the original design, just put sheriff's office on it. The patch that's there is the one that I wore when I started here in 2003. We changed it for a very short period of time. My understanding of this is that Sheriff Campbell did not like how large the word sheriff was and wanted to bring it forward. Once we got to this and they put those on uniforms, he still was not very happy with how big the word sheriff was. And so we go to these up here. You definitely know that you're dealing with a deputy. And now, honestly, what I'm wearing now, other than an overvest, is what we wear. So the patch, unless we're wearing Class A uniforms, are completely gone. But that's the ideation that we've done over the years. We've tried a couple of times to do different redesigns of the patches, and nothing's really stuck. We talk about badges over the years, the sheriff's posse, different things. Even if people weren't actual law enforcement officers, so the sheriff's posse was a volunteer area that came in, and they would help out with different things. They didn't want them wearing the 5-point stars, so we would have these. These all came from Deputy Ralph Johnson, who was part of the sheriff's posse, was also a deputy sheriff in the 60s and 70s and 80s. And then I'm not quite sure what era this one's from. Obviously, it looks like it's prior to 1957 because of the size and shape, but it's also a possibility that someone had this made. This was given to me by Deputy Larry Folsom after he retired. It had been given to him at some point in time, and he didn't have any history on it. So based on the clasp that's on the back of it, it could be post-1957 and someone just had something made, but it's just an interesting badge. This badge here is actually up on display in my display in the front. This is the oldest known representation of a Florida sheriff's badge that we know. When they built the hotel down where the old jail used to be on Gang Street, Matt Drake was one of our deputies. He was down there working off duty, and a guy comes up to him and hands him that badge and says, "Hey, I think we found something that belongs to you." There is a hallmark on the back of that badge that we have been able to trace back to the 1880s. The hallmark that's on there was only used by that company for about a 5 or 6 year period during that time of the 1880s. Most deputies, most sheriff's offices at that point in time would have probably worn a more generic, just deputy sheriff badge. So if they're floating out there someplace, we probably wouldn't have known what county it was unless someone's family said, "Hey, this is what my loved one wore." As you can see, this one actually has Leon County on it. It literally fell out of the ground near the jail. They looked down, saw it, and was like, "Okay." These two are William Smith. He was the undersheriff at one point in time, or chief deputy, but they called him back at that point in time. He was there prior to 1957, so these are different versions that they wore. There's a couple of these sitting up here too to look at. This version here is going to be from the 1920s. I've only seen 2 of these. I own one of them. That one's up here as well. That actual badge is sitting in here. The same with these. So 20s, 30s, 40s, that time period, 40s, 50s. It didn't seem like there was a whole lot of uniformity at that point in time. I think here, from what I can tell, we have several of these. I have about 3 of these badges. They all have names at the bottom of them, which we all learned at some point in time that when people stop working for you, you can't issue that badge to someone else. The one that I have up front is actually given to, it was another gentleman. I've reached out to his family, Hook Barber. He was only a deputy in the jail for about 3 years, and he was good friends with Sheriff Joyce, and I guess he let him keep the badge, so he turned it into a money clip and carried it in his pocket. A little offside of the Leon County Sheriff's Office. I don't know if anybody knew this or not, but we used to have constables. Starting in the late 1880s, you had constables and justice of the peace. And the reason why I talk about this is the gentleman down here He's a gentleman named Thad Barrow Dock Opper. 1940, he was making contact with someone that he needed to talk to down at a juke joint. So people know what a juke joint is, at a bar in Frenchtown. When he went in there to go make contact, he and a different gentleman, one that he wasn't even trying to talk to, got into an argument. The guy ends up taking the gun from him, shoots him, and kills him there in the bar. Steps outside. The deputy constable that was outside ends up getting shot and killed out there. And there was a lot of outrage when all of this took place, but not in the way that you might think. So in 1940, obviously we're less than 100 years from the Civil War and everything that happened from there. When he was killed, several people from the bar came in and testified that he came in as the aggressor. He came in and got overly aggressive with this person. He yelled at him, he screamed at him, he pushed him, and he started it. The constable started it. So to tell you how things progressed at that point in time, the black man that killed 2 white cops in 1940 in a southern city did less than 10 years in jail for killing 2 people. And that tells you, if you look at that part of what it was and everything that happened, that's a huge story. I mean, because you look at what 30 years earlier, you have the same thing, and people go down and they snatch somebody out of the jail and they hung him and beat him. So it's a whole different environment at that point in time. Leon County at that point in time decided they no longer wanted to have active justice of the peace and active constables. So literally from 1940, after this happened, the next election was 1941 until 1972, when the state did away with the requirement to have at least 2. We would run under no non-working justice of the peace and constables. So people would get elected to those offices, and they literally ran on the platform of, we're not going to open the office, we're not going to be involved with this. They were supposed to be, and they served as law enforcement for areas. So you had one in Shares, you had one in Miccosukee, Lake Jackson, Bradfordville, all of that. And they would go on the weekends when the deputies couldn't get out there, because again, you're looking at the 1800s until 1940, you couldn't pick up the phone and call 911. You had to go. If something happened at your house, you had to get to a deputy someplace. More than likely, you had to go down to the jail where you knew a deputy was going to be, drag him all the way back up to your house, and figure that out. So in that case, you could go to your constable. The constable would take them in front of the justice of the peace. I know specifically in Shares that the constable and the justice of the peace, their last name was Shares. They were brothers. They definitely worked in conjunction with each other to make sure that some pockets got lined. And like anything else, there's always a portion of things that can be corruptive if things let happen. So in 1940, we do away with constables here in Leon County. They did serve well in other counties and more rural counties, but Tallahassee at that point started to grow up a little bit more. First motors unit, most people think is going to be in the 1970s for us. Our first motors unit is actually in 1929. The last name here, for those of you that work in the city at all, Dupree. We have Dupree Street, which is where all of the fleet is for the city of Tallahassee. His brother was the first, or was one of the long-serving fleet managers in the city of Tallahassee's history. Dupree Street is named after his brother. I have talked to, he didn't have any children. I've talked to grandchildren of his brother, and they have a lovely history. When I sent or a lovely opinion of him. When I sent the picture to make sure that it was him, because I'd gotten this, if you look here, you see where it says Deputy Sheriff, Leon County. But she identified him. She goes, "Oh yeah, that's his ears. He's definitely a recruit." At the time in 1929, so what happens here in 1929 is the governor is trying to find a way to make sure that people aren't speeding and doing stupid things outside of the city. Right now, when our ticket is written, a portion of that ticket goes back to the agency that writes it, goes back to the county or the city that writes it. In this case, the sheriff had no reason to want to send his deputies out to stop people from speeding and killing themselves on county roads with these brand new automobiles. So the county, the state decides, hey, what we'll do is we'll pay half of their salary as long as the county agrees to pay the other half. And so Leon County, like several counties in the state, took him up on that offer. He was paid $125 a month, but he had to have his own motorcycle, which he wrecked 3 times while on duty. Typical deputy sheriff, right? All right. And the program ended in 1934. He actually had wrecked so many times. We did have one other person that was a motors officer during that time period. He was only there for about 6 months, and then when he got back from breaking something, he was able to take over again. Our first air support unit would have been started with Deputy Jim Bragdon in 1974 under Sheriff Hamlin. If you look at the helicopter, this is our first helicopter in 1974. Up until 2020, we had always used secondhand helicopters in military surplus. You can see the civilian defense symbol down here on our first helicopter. This is Deputy Bragdon. The cool thing about Deputy Bragdon, who retired as a lieutenant, is this was his take-home vehicle. He was the only person that I knew of during the time period that was allowed to live outside of the county, and he has an airstrip in his front yard to this day.
He had a helicopter just like that, was painted gold. He would fly it to the airport.
There you go.
From Jefferson County. That's why he was allowed to live outside.
And so for this one here,
He lived in Jefferson County?
Yes.
yeah, he lives in Jefferson County. So for this one here, we did buy our first brand new helicopter in 2020, and we went from a staff of about 2 or 3 over time to now we have 14 staff members, which are pilots, maintenance, reserve members, and we've recently, in 2020, deputized a couple of Tallahassee police officers that actually go up and they help us patrol. We're pretty close to having 24/7 coverage over the county, which will be the first time ever that we've been able to have actually people on staff, on duty at the time to get up in a helicopter and go. First SWAT team would have been 1982. We see Sheriff Boone here. I would love to go through and name everyone here. I can name a few of them, but they initially in 1982, when they were put together, the street crimes unit. That was their only job. They found out pretty quickly that deputy sheriffs can get in trouble if they don't have anything to do. So they decided, okay, we're going to make it a secondary job. After a little bit of that, they were actually sent to LAPD to train with some members over there. And then you look at how much and what we do now and how we do patches now. You look at the patches that are on their shoulders here and how they all look like they're different colors or different shades. They would actually go through and dye them in cups, the old patches that came off the uniforms, to make sure that they could they had some subdued patches instead of having these bright yellow things that we use out here now. And I always like to end with this. Deputy sheriffs are gonna deputy sheriff. This is a ad taken out by a deputy sheriff in Leon County in 1930. It was in the Daily Democrat, and I'll read it for you. Take notice, fair warning. Are you at work? If not, why not? You will have to go to work or go to jail. There is plenty of work for everyone, and good wages are paid in every line. Take your choice. Go to work and stay at work, or go to jail and stay on the county roads and work there with stripes or under the gun. There is no excuse for idlers and vagrants. Work is plentiful, wages good. Find it quick or I will find you. Do your duty at work and quit loafing around, or I will do my duty as the law directs and puts you on the county road where you will have to work. Take your choice. I am hot on your trail. Last notice, last chance. I go now, but I will return. If you are not at work, well, it's up to you. Deputy Sheriff W.F. Banks, Leon County, Florida. So, obviously, with that much history in the sheriff's office, there's a lot of stuff to skip over. I don't really go into the Bundy stuff. I think a lot of people know that, and quite honestly, I don't mind talking about it, but we kind of glorify Bundy a bit much. The guys and girls that put together that case and did everything they could did an amazing job with that. I do have some memorabilia up here. If people are interested in coming up, I'll stand up here and talk with you about it. As part of that, I have what we call the original Bundy brace. When Bundy was put on trial in Miami, we were ordered by the judge in an early part of the hearings in Tallahassee that we could not put him in restraints that were visible because it would unduly prejudice the jury. So we had to come up with something, and again, I don't know specifically if our jailer at the time, Art Golden, saw this someplace and had it made, or I know it was made down in St. Pete, but it is a polio brace that has been retrofitted to fit underneath his clothing. I have the original fingerprints that we got from Pensacola when Bundy was brought over, because at the time, we have electronic stuff now, so you can compare it immediately and kind of go from there. So at that time, they would print him, hand us the prints, hand us him. We'd come over to Tallahassee. They'd print him again, they'd compare, and they could say, absolutely, this is the same person. A lot of the patches and badges that you see that were up there are on display up here as well. The uniforms that we wore over the years, and then there's 2 what we call leather saps. They're leather pieces that would have been used back in the 50s and 60s where people didn't behave, and this gentleman here caught up with them. They get whacked in the head with a piece of lead, which I'm sure works really well for a lot of people. So, does anybody have any specific questions that I can answer, or? Yes? I don't know. This is the only mention that I can find of W.F. Banks. So this is 1930. Sheriff Stoudemire would have been the sheriff. I don't see any other mention of him. If he paid for this himself, I know what would happen nowadays. If Sheriff McNeil would have opened the newspaper and found that, I would be looking for employment elsewhere. I have a feeling that maybe some of the staying, but I don't see any other mentions of Mr. Banks working with the sheriff's office. So I don't know the answer to that. Yes, sir.
Did you say that Jones, who was involved in the leasing,
Yes, sir. Jim Bob Jones. Yes, sir.
ended up being a Tallahassee police officer later?
Yes, sir. So he did some time with the city in between, and eventually got on. I want to say either the early 50s. I think he got on. I'm sorry, early 40s. He got on, and then eventually retired with the Tallahassee Police Department. I believe in 19. Other than looking in the mirror, I don't see anything else. There's no trial that takes place because they don't have a witness, so they have to drop the charges. I'm sure there was a lot of public shame that went along with it, but having to do jail time or anything along those, and no, sir, I don't see anything else.
What I heard was that they kind of pick people up off the street, later, and ship them down to Shamrock.
I'm not familiar with that. This is the only scheme that I'm aware of. I know that the judge and the sheriff had worked together and with the railroad company, and anybody that didn't pay their ticket, that was kind of just easy bait. There was enough of them. They'd pull enough of them off to do that. My understanding is the judge and the sheriff both got $5 per person they sent down, which I guess in 1923 was a lot of money. It was enough to risk your job over. So,
Over here.
yes, sir.
Is there any work being done anymore on the Teems murder? That, in our lifetime, of the 80s, that's the most significant.
Absolutely.
Ever. It changed the town.
It did. So what are the two biggest things that changed Tallahassee's innocence, right? So you got the Sims murders in 1966, and then you have obviously the Bundy. Because if you look at what happened with Chi Omega, it was 2 or 3 months before we figured out that it wasn't somebody from town. What I can tell you is that as far as I know it's an open case still. They work it as much as they can if something comes in. My understanding is that they know who did it. The person's no longer alive. There's no one to charge, but there's not enough information to go, hey, this case is closed. I don't know who it would be. I don't have that information.
5 years ago, Willie Meggs put together, for a brief period, a task force.
Mm-hmm.
And he put his attorney on it as the head.
Yes, sir.
Then found the guy was allegedly writing a book on the same time, and Willie fired him.
Correct.
That was the end of the task force, and that's the last official thing that's been done. And a lot of us who know a lot of the details really want somebody with the sheriff's office to at least call those 2 people in.
Mm-hmm.
One of them came in, and this organization right here
Okay.
saw the video about 6 years ago down at City Hall. And we saw the woman's, I'm gonna call it testimony.
Mhm.
She voluntarily came in and sat in Sheriff Campbell's office, drew a sketch of the murder scene, gave details of the killing that only a person who was there could have done.
Sure.
Said it was a dream she had.
Okay.
And we all saw this at City Hall.
Understood.
And, anyway.
So the honest answer is
Right there on the table, so to speak.
I got you. So the honest answer is I don't know enough about that case. I worked in violent crimes for a little bit, was able to look over some of the stuff that's there. Obviously, with it still being considered an open case, even if I did have information, there's certain things I wouldn't be able to give out overall. I know that Sheriff Katsaris did a speech at Tiger Bay about 3 years ago. The sheriff was on the panel, Sheriff McNeil was on the panel, and so was Jack Campbell, who was the state attorney at the time as well. And he made an announcement with their permission that even though he wouldn't give out the name, that the case had been solved. That's the last time I heard anything about it. I know that it is considered an open case still. Beyond that, I don't know the answer to that question. So I wish I had more answers. I also don't include it in here.
Anytime you get a chance.
I've got about 2.5 years left until I'm eligible, so maybe after that. No, I'm joking. Someone else? Yes, ma'am.
Dave, there is a documentary that some FSU students did about 4 or 5 years ago called 621 Miriam Court.
Mm-hmm.
And you can find it on YouTube. You'll see if you really enjoy it.
Okay. Anybody else have any questions? Yes, ma'am.
How have the sidearms changed through the years?
How the sidearms changed over the years. So,
Like, what are you wearing?
so right now I have, and I might be the only person that's ever given a presentation to you guys armed, by the way, at least that you can see. So right now we carry, it's a Glock. It's a Glock 9mm. The cool thing about this is I have a red dot sight on the top of it that's very fancy. I'm
You
sure.
didn't start with a Glock.
No, so when I started in 2003, I was the first recruit class that was actually handed a firearm that was owned by the sheriff's office. Prior to 2003, everyone else had to bring in whatever they could. They were only restricted by caliber. And so people would come out and they were able to shoot whatever they had as long as they qualified with it and it fit within what they were told they could carry. That we still do that a little bit with our off-duty stuff, but yes, until then, you carried a revolver, didn't you, Stan, when you first got
Yeah.
in? So,
When I started,
You have to take
there
your
weren't any.
own gun?
used to.
What-
When I first got here, we didn't, but when Stan started at the sheriff's office, they had to provide
When I
their own.
started in October of '75, you had your own gun. And I worked several months with nothing but a belt on because I hadn't been to the class. And they finally sent me in. I was a reserve deputy, but I worked a lot. But it had to be a revolver of certain brands, or 5 or 6 brands, and it had to be a 38 or better. So normally it was 38, 357, or 44.
So for those of you in the back that can't hear him speak, back in '75 when he started at the sheriff's office, he was required to provide his own firearm. It had to be a revolver and it had to be a specific caliber that was within what they were allowed to carry at that point in time. The class that I came in with in 2003 was the first one that was provided a weapon that the sheriff's office had actually purchased. It was an H&K 45 caliber.
I have mine at home.
We got off of those pretty quickly because they're kind of expensive to try and fix because they're foreign guns. And then we went to Glocks and we've changed over time. We've changed the same caliber. Hadn't changed brands since then. But yeah.
Did they have it at the very beginning of the
No,
show?
they did.
That's a good question. My guess is that probably a revolver of some kind, probably old cowboy looking guns of some kind,
Probably has to buy this.
that they probably had to provide themselves. Yes. Yep. Yes, ma'am.
You remember that? I was gonna bring it back though, and drop 6 inches.
So no, I haven't done any research on the crime rate. And if you look at what I've got in here, I don't really get into like the two biggest, like we've already had questions about the Sims and I talked about Bundy a little bit. When we did the podcast and we talked about it, which I was told was the hottest podcast we'd ever done. Is that right? Where's the hottest podcast?
Yeah.
I joke. There were some issues where it caught fire. So the podcast we talked about, if you look at the history of a law enforcement agency, you're going to see the history of the town that it's in. We're not only is it because we're citizens too. I was speaking with some people here earlier about when I have a bad day and I have to go work, I'm still dealing with someone probably on their worst day at that point in time. We try to teach our deputies that when you go to a burglary call, it might be your third that day, but the person you're talking to, it's their first, probably ever. Crime kind of goes up and down. You'll see it go nationwide, up and down, depending on what it is. Everybody runs on crime rate at some point in time and what they can do to either lower it or back and forth. I don't really get into that part of it, but you can look at the sheriff's office, you can look at TPD, and you can see that we very much mirror the society that we're in at the time that we're going on. Yes, you had one? So I thought about hand over. Yes, ma'am.
How about, who's the first female deputy?
First female deputy, and I should have put her picture in here because I haven't. Sheriff Katsaris brought her in. Oh my God, my mind just went blank. She worked for Capitol Police first. She was the first Capitol Police.
Mary Ann Kirkham?
Yes,
He brought her-
she's now Mary Ann Frisbee.
Yes.
Mary Ann Kirkland was the first deputy we ever hired, a person to do law enforcement. However, she wasn't brought on to do like patrol. She was brought in to be a crime scene analyst. She worked in crime scene, but she actually carried a badge, carried a gun. Donna Cormier. The first female we ever hired to do law enforcement to go on patrol was a lady named Donna Cormier. She passed away about 6 or 7 years ago. She went down to Alachua County not too long after that. She actually did crime scene work as well. I actually have a picture of her being sworn in. I remember, I need to put that into this presentation. Katsaris, so 78. And the weird story behind that was she worked for Capitol Police. She actually got fired from Capitol Police. She sued them and went through. The first African American we ever hired, I need to add that in here as well. And my mind just went blank again. 1966, so the road out in front of the sheriff's office is right now is named after James Morgan. James Morgan was the first major. He was the first African-American that held several positions at the sheriff's office. He was the first ever promoted to sergeant. Junius Robinson. Junius Robinson was the first person that we ever hired to do law enforcement as an African-American. And you look at that time period it was there, Junius was brought in, he was only allowed to work black areas. He could not go into white areas and then respond to crime. When Morgan was brought in to be a detective, he was only allowed to work crimes that had been perpetrated by and against black people. He was not allowed to work anything else. And if they figured out there was something else involved, they immediately gave the case over to somebody that was white. So that way there wasn't an issue. So again, we mirror our times, right? So you look at the 1960s. It's not right, it's not good, but we mirror the times that we're in at that point in time.
Pretty much still that way in 75 when I started.
Yes, sir.
Just so you clarify that.
Juniors were called there.
He was the first black hired in the modern era.
Correct, yes, yeah, we did have some deputies back in Reconstruction area that may have been African American at that point. We definitely had 2 sheriffs that were, but as you move through and you look at history at the turn of the century and everything that took place at that point in time with Jim Crow laws and everything that took place, this modern era of the sheriff's office. Thank you very much. I appreciate the clarification. Anybody else?
Well, thank you. Dave, we like to give our speakers a little honorarium. We've gone back and forth between coffee mugs and travel mugs and books and so forth, and so we come up with all sorts of things. And several of us found several copies lately of Bertram Groen's book on antebellum Tallahassee. You may have this or you may not, but if you don't, then you've got it again. And thank you. Book is out of print. It's a very good book to find. I do want to say one thing about the Sims murder situation and the Historical Society meeting. You know, we record these meetings, and right here on my phone, we record these meetings and we put them on our YouTube channel. And a couple of years ago, Dave Lang found the CD of the meeting down at City Hall back, I guess, around 2015, something like that, that may have been the most heavily attended meeting we've ever had. It was huge. But we have digitized that, and that is on our YouTube channel too. And as I think I've been told, we've had more hits on that than any other thing that we've ever posted. And so, you know, it is. It's an unfinished story in a lot of ways. Thank everyone so much for coming tonight. I know we've got a lot of breaking down and cleaning up here and everything, and so we will meet again in the theater down there on January the 8th with Mark Tarmy, and we hope everybody has a happy and safe Christmas, and we will see you then. I think that's what it is. I'd love to watch it. Yeah, it's there. Not bad. Yeah. I wasn't even remember. How are you? Yes, ma'am. I do, yeah. My time is not. Thank you very much. Yes, sir. Not me. Ooh, let me stop this.